Thanks. This is one of my, I got my docs.
I love the socks and the docs.
We call these y'alternative because it's kind of Western with the buckle, but it's very doc. Yeah, the lady who sold me these said,
I like those.
You're into the y'alternative. Y'alternative.
You're like, okay.
I don't know. Just like
I guess I am.
Welcome to the Marketing Team of One podcast, where we have conversations about the issues one-person marketing teams face when trying to meet their goals with limited time and budgets. Now here's your hosts, Eric and Mike. We have a very special guest with us this morning. Welcome back to the Marketing Team of One podcast. We have Doug Aguiar. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Doug is, what are we going to call him? A big wig, high-powered, hugely qualified marketing and branding expert. Graduated from University of Washington with a MBA, and then went to USC for journalism, and is former CMO for Golden One Credit Union, one of the top 10 largest credit unions in the country. So solid overachiever right here. Wow. You've had a lot of experience. So when you were at, I'll say WAMU, right? Isn't that what they called it? Washington Mutual. Is that, did you do marketing there too as well?
Yes.
So your journey through the financial services industry has all been marketing based.
Yep.
I wanted to have Doug on here because the perspective that he's going to bring is one that not a lot of people can bring to this podcast because of that level of expertise and responsibility that he was in charge of. So we're going to touch on a lot of different issues that may not directly relate to small you teams, which is what this podcast is all about. Let's go back to the beginning of your journey a little bit. So you did journalism, which is fascinating because I think that's a really helpful background for messaging. When you were doing journalism, was your aspiration to go into something around press, publishing, things like that? Or was it more like, I'm going to use that insight to help me work more around branding, messaging, and things like that?
Yeah. Studying journalism, originally I wanted to be a broadcast journalist.
Okay.
So I love sports, and I wanted to be a reporter, like on the anchor desk reporting about sports.
Oh.
So that was, way back
Cool.
when I was in my late teens, that was the idea. And then I pivoted to public relations and was really interested in writing.
Yeah.
And to this day, I'm a frustrated writer. My teams would tell you I'm a frustrated writer. I love to write, and I have my own style, and it has helped me to tell those stories. It's just how stories are being told. I've had to pivot along the way in my career, as most people do. I think marketers, though, one of the key things about storytelling and marketing is really making your consumer the hero of your story arc. And it's interesting that companies seem to forget that. I feel like that was one of the reasons we were so successful at Golden One in branding, is that we were always very clear that when we came to work every day, it was about our members. And, in the credit union space, your members are your owners.
Yeah.
One of the other interesting things that I learned being new to Sacramento about the arena was that it attracted a different caliber of acts to Sacramento.
Yeah.
So they really had that kind of cultural impact as well, where Taylor Swift or, Justin Bieber, like some of those people, were actually stopping in Sacramento, whereas previously they wouldn't. So I was actually interviewing while they were negotiating the naming rights to the arena. Again, I was living in Seattle at the time. Of course, when I saw that they had signed the naming rights agreement, it piqued my interest in this role, because what marketer would not want to work on launching an NBA state-of-the-art arena that is really looking to revitalize an area that kind of needs a little push.
Yep.
So it really interested me in the role. And ultimately, I ended up bringing two teams. This was a newly created role for Golden One, the chief marketing officer role. And so one of the things I'm very proud of is and I think this helped quell some of the criticism, is we allowed our members to enter the arena before the public entered the arena.
Oh, yeah.
So
That's
we were
special.
basically saying, like I would always say, this is their house. This is your house.
Yeah.
You paid for it. So you're going to be one of the first to see it
Nice.
before anyone else gets to see it. So that helped a little bit as well to create some momentum with the membership.
What's that like when you're handed this opportunity? Is there just, okay, like, let's get the team together, let's brainstorm some really cool things that are really outside the box, because this is a event, a marketing opportunity, but also a cultural event. Let's brainstorm. What was that process like in the boardroom or behind the closed doors kind of thing? It'd be interesting. You're the one they point to, right? If something goes off the rails, it's on you, right?
Unfortunately. I always wanted to be a CMO. Once you get to that role, to your point, you do have to have a pretty thick skin, because everyone has an opinion about marketing, you know.
Yeah.
Everyone's the expert. So you really have to listen a lot, and there's no right answer.
Brand is such a powerful force.
I remember this one conversation I had with somebody who drove a Range Rover, bought a Range Rover, and he was saying it's so practical and I can fit things in it, and I do a lot of construction. And then I said, there's other cars you could have bought that were practical, that you could fit your construction. You paid a premium for this. Your emotions, obviously played a role here, and status and prestige,
Right.
And as a marketer, those are things that you really need to get good at if you want to be good at marketing.
So you could take those, and I'm guessing, and you can confirm this, yes or no, tens of millions of dollars of marketing budget. Can I assume that it's at that level? Let's just say. I know you can't disclose exact numbers, but it's...
Yeah, well, I would say it would be per year.
Yeah.
Because over time, it was hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of millions or hundreds of
thousands?
Hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands.
Okay. Really critical point here, and I love the fact that you brought up this brand, back to the branding thing again, because I think it's hard for us to justify sometimes to people who are much more maybe quantitatively focused, let's just say CFOs maybe. What is the value? What's the return on that investment for a brand? Because I think people are, it can be expensive. Like you said, it could be millions of dollars at the scale that you're doing it. Think about it. If you're changing logos, you're changing signage, you're changing messaging, you might be changing billboards, and everything that people see and experience has to be changed out. And that's something that when we go in and talk to some of our customers, we have to explain to them, okay, this is the initial investment to get you the assets and, the messaging and the actual art files and all that stuff to get your new brand. Then there's the implementation cost around things, which is a whole other thing. So I know CFOs see that, and then immediately they start doing the calculations like, why is this important? But maybe you could speak a little bit to that.
Yeah. And I actually looked this up preparing for this podcast.
Research?
I did some research. Good, I did my own research.
I love it.
Some scrappy research. If you look at the most valuable brands, okay, and maybe you could even guess what they are. 8 of the top 10 are technology brands.
Apple.
Course, yeah. I do the A's: Apple, Amazon, Alphabet / Google.
Yeah.
Walmart's in there, and Microsoft. Yeah. So Microsoft, obviously tech. Walmart's one of the big ones that's not tech. And those are worth, like, I want to say it was $540 billion, just the intellectual property alone.
Oh my gosh.
For us, in my experience, we would do tracking studies, brand tracking studies, which would really, one advantage to those would be it would help us optimize our investments. So we would learn what's driving the needle, on awareness, consideration, choice. At Golden One, we were off the charts on, we were number one in consideration in the Sacramento market, beating the big banks.
Wow.
So Bank of America, Chase, and Wells Fargo, we beat them when it came to consideration, that people would consider us if they were changing or choosing for the first time a financial institution. So
that's good.
But we also learned that, were they seeing the billboards? Were they, how were they seeing the brand? What messages were they taking away? So that, even for the left brain person, it helps from the standpoint of quantifying and optimizing your spend, learning what people are seeing.
Just being more surgical and being strategic in how that's implemented. That's really where a lot of that discretion or an analysis maybe came from, or feedback. Possibly.
Exactly. Yeah. So things like you have more pricing power, think about it from a recruiting and retention standpoint.
Yeah.
You know, I would always say, you know, there's a reason you're sitting here. You knew the Golden One brand, or you knew the, you know, I worked at Chase or Lennar, you know, you knew the brand and you wanted it on your resume. There was value to that brand on your resume.
Yeah. So there's that friction in the sales process too.
I agree. You know, I think it shortens the sales cycle.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to do as much research and.
Yeah, and so that service piece ties a lot to like B2B. Just to bring it back to my world a little bit, is, you know, when you work with a great design firm, possibly, you know, you get personal service and they know who you are and they know all your files and your whole story and things like that. That's an intangible that is super valuable and makes a lot of your customers return because of that, you know?
Yeah, I completely agree, and I couldn't have said it better. And I think it's the personalization. You know, now they call it hyper personalization. And so I know if you're a smaller organization, that can be difficult because it typically requires technology.
Yeah.
You know, but I would say, you know, if you're looking to focus your marketing team of one, my focus would be, you know, on the digital aspects. Like I would focus on your website, because, you know, there's a reason HubSpot's called HubSpot. You know, website is a hub.
Yeah.
And that's where you're going to direct most of your traffic. So invest the time to you know, to have the website pull people through the funnel. If you can focus on your website, I would say lead nurturing, because if they're hitting your website, it's a shame if you let them go. Like they've made an effort to hit the website.
Tactical, what does that mean on a website? A landing page, sign up for a newsletter, little kind of stuff? I'm just thinking of your story now, and it's like, wow, you came into it doing the Golden One Center. Well, and I think that from cost perspective too, I think that there's, you know, when you look at kind of traditional advertising, traditional media, the cost on that is exponentially higher than probably hiring an influencer or a couple of influencers that really speak more to those younger generations, but have so much power over those younger generations. Because those younger they don't even have televisions. They don't watch TV commercials. They don't watch the stuff that, you know, you and I were raised on, you know, or listen to the radio, you know, and hear those commercials.
That's true. And, you know, sometimes it's not the amount of followers they have. The micro influencers can be valuable as well, where you have a niche. Don't just look at the volume. Look at the quality and how it aligns with your mission, vision, and then your target.
Interesting.
Which are I guess they call them micro influencers, right? It would be more the smaller influencer.
And you're talking like 50,000 followers or even maybe less.
I would say even maybe, depending on what it is. And, it could be, and how powerful they are. It could be even, and what product you're selling, you know, what your price point is and things like that. It could be less.
I think it's becoming more and more popular because as those younger generations age up, they still hang on to that. They in fact look at like produced television commercials and radio commercials as poison in a way. They almost react negatively to it because there's no trust there. They've seen it. That trust is eroded over time, and they're going to trust that YouTuber or that. Sometimes
the raw videos, to your point, are better versus the highly stylized, you know, highly produced videos.
The produced stuff is, it's almost like there's a disdain for it almost. It's almost an you know, it's a negative thing, right? In a sense, you know,
you have to have some content, and then thing I don't think I mentioned, and is really efficient, is the retargeting, right? Which is they've already hit your website, so grab the cookies. You can still use cookies. Google has not retired them. They keep saying they're going to, but they have not. And hit them up after the fact. And if you can personalize the retargeting, like if they went to, let's say I'm in financial services. So let's say they went to our home loans page and checked out a mortgage or mortgage rates.
Yep.
You know, try to capture, you'll get their cookies unless they had it turned off.
Right.
Some people do.
Which they can.
But then, and then just followed up with a message about mortgages or like a first-time home buyer seminar or something like that.
Yeah. Like some educational piece that's not so much just like, here, buy us now. It's like, here, you look like you're doing a little bit of homework on this. Here's a little bit more information you might want to know about home loans or whatever.
Yeah, because that builds trust at the end. And, I think sometimes if it's too hard of a sell, like I know we all want to sell,
Yeah.
but it can be a big turnoff for people.
Well, and I think if you're open to it, and for me speaking from a consumer standpoint, I don't mind retargeting. If I'm passionate about researching sporting equipment or, something that I'm interested in, I'm kind of like, oh yeah, that's a cool, well, this is on sale. Okay. I'll check out the email. That's fine. I'm into it because I'm obviously doing homework. So there isn't this disdain just across the board against retargeting, and I think that's a powerful tool as well. Retargeting.
I think the thing about digital is that, and I read a book about this, is it more adds value versus if digital is effective when it adds value, which means it recognizes the situation the person is in, has some personalization, versus like a television commercial, which is intrusive.
Interesting.
And people don't necessarily want to see it because it doesn't necessarily apply to them. So this is why there's been a big trend into digital, is not just the demographics, but also this idea of it allows you to capture some information and deliver relevant information to them. So that, those are some of the, and also the performance marketing aspects of digital is appealing in that you're only paying if they click. You're only paying if they see a video.
Yeah.
That's also a huge trend because those left brain folks, they really like to be able to quantify
this
and only pay if there's a behavior, which mass media doesn't do that.
Yeah, and I think when you use that television commercial example, that's hard. That format alone, just the format of a 30-second or a minute commercial, you can't deliver enough value and compete with a piece of really highly targeted, relevant educational content. Like let's talk about home loans. They can only say so much in a minute, but if you send them to a link or a white paper or something that gives them vast amounts of knowledge, that will beat out that kind of, and I kind of look at those opportunities as more something that's kind of almost brand awareness as opposed to actual, targeted strategic marketing and advertising. You look at that brand awareness stuff, and that's really hard to justify. Obviously, if you're at a scale of a golden one, you have to have a brand awareness piece tied to your marketing and advertising campaigns, but it can't be the focus, right? I mean, is there just to speak to that kind of mix, was there a ratio that was like, we're going to spend this much on brand marketing, and the CMO or CFO was like, all right, I know that's just fluff maybe on the budget, and we're going to then spend this amount of budget on actual relevant stuff? Like, speak a little bit about that breakdown.
Yeah, a couple of things on that is, fortunately, I worked for an organization that believed in branding, and for a CEO and a CFO that really understood the value of branding, that, she would say, if they're not aware of you, how can they choose you? And particularly in a financial services space, you're not going to trust your money with a brand you've never heard.
That's true.
Okay, yeah. So there's that aspect to it. And so we did track it, and again, fortunately, and I feel like it did pay off in all those other, we talked about the benefits earlier of branding. We definitely had loyalty of people who could have moved their money and maybe have gotten a little bit of higher return, but they believed in our mission and our involvement in the community, and we were a local company, and we kind of pitched that, which I would always do as a local business,
Good.
And then, I do think there's a place for mass media. I think the idea is you want integrated campaigns, which puts a premium on planning. This is also important, is that, and I'm doing a little bit of consulting now, and I have a client. I actually have a marketing team of one as a client. Nice. And so yeah, it was kind of good. I just talked to him the other day. So, he's very overwhelmed, and he's also doing shipping, and he's also doing marketing. And so
there you go.
I'm like, what are you doing shipping? And he's putting out fires, and but he's doing the Google AdWords and things like that. And but the point is that you want, and you've probably experienced this before, where you see a commercial or you see an ad, digital or otherwise, and you don't even know who the brand is the first time you see it.
Right.
but you kind of like it, and you're like, but what was the brand? And then you see it again and again and again, and they used to say you have to see it 7 times before it registers. I think now it's probably 10 or 12.
11, I think Google said a while back. Yeah.
You know better than I, but in this cluttered environment, right? And so, but that's where the integrators. I always said, like when they're driving to the airport, they see the billboard. They're listening to the radio, they hear the golden one, or streaming, Pandora or whatever. They hear the ad. They go on their website, they get a digital ad, or you know what I mean? Like,
so would you say
banner ad, or
would you say then in the banking and financial services consumer B2C space that you were an expert in,
yes,
brand awareness maybe is even more important, as where with other organizations and companies it maybe isn't as big of an investment line on that, but that trust issue is really where the brand awareness campaigns support that. And so there is a lot more justification behind just doing brand awareness campaigns, which I've heard both sides of the story. Like, a lot of people are like, why are we wasting our money? Who cares?
Right.
But with a bank and a financial institution, you got to build trust. You got to build a brand. It's got to live in their head for a long, long time. Maybe it's a lot more valuable and more important.
Interesting that you said that. I hadn't really thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right. And you have to look at what your competitors are doing too. Competing against the big banks. They were on TV. They were, And I think one other aspect to it that, so in answer to the question is, I definitely feel like it depends what you're selling, and what your competitors are doing, and how you can kind of compete in that space.
Live in the octagon.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think the other key thing would be to humanize the brand, like have a face to the brand. And I think that's sometimes people forget. Like, I try not to use too many stock photos, or let's put it this way. If I use stock photos, I try to depict people in the photos to have some human interaction. And I also think events. So if I were Scrappy and I were you and I was a marketing team of one, just to kind of sum up, I would say, we talked about website, we talked about social media. I would focus on, if I had 1 million, let's say, versus tens of millions, I would focus on search engine optimization, which is website, optimize, and content.
Findability.
So a dynamic website where you're searching high on our organic search. That's changing with AI, but maybe.
Well, they call that what are the AIO now? Artificial intelligence optimization. Well, this has been super informative. I mean, this is jam-packed with solid, crazy information. I mean, this is wild to hear all this stuff at the scale that you've been able to implement all those things. Let's do a little bit of a recap here, and then if there's anything else you'd like to add, but let's just speak to the marketing teams of one out there. Let's go down the list again. You started with website, SEO. Take it from there. I mean, let's just wrap it up. What are the main points that a marketing team of one would really...
Some of the things I've been thinking about and advice that I would give in summary would be, given the demographic changes and the focus on mobile and digital, is focus on your owned digital assets. Website, there's a reason they call it HubSpot. It's really a central focal point that you're going to drive a lot of traffic to. It makes sense to, if you're going to focus and have a limited budget, to spend time on that. You're driving traffic to the site. You're spending money to drive traffic to the site. You want to optimize it. And really consider the full funnel, capture the leads, have some content that's relevant, that's not so sales oriented necessarily, because there's a reason these folks that are visiting your site aren't buying. And then, nurture them. I would definitely use retargeting. It's a very efficient method. And again, it sort of can give you that return on your investment. On a related note, I would look at SEO, and that content's going to juice your SEO, particularly if you launch a blog, and actually, if you do a newsletter and capture the content, those people are going to be coming back. You're going to be giving them links that go back to the, that's what you want to do, right? Is give them links in your newsletter or in your communication that takes them back to the website. So that'll all help with the SEO. And then I would look at search engine optimization and just buying some keywords.
Okay.
So again, if you have a limited budget, look at the keywords. You can do conquesting, where you buy some keywords that have your competitor's brand in there. So if they're searching for a competitor, you can pop up in the ad portion of the results.
Conquesting. Never used that word on this podcast, so I like that.
Yeah, it's a cool word. Cool word. The next step I would be like, if you still have more budget and time, is really looking at your brand reputation and managing your brand reputation across all digital properties, social on the internet. And there's tools you can buy. There's sentiment tools you can buy to really gauge that. And then there's Trustpilot does a lot of work around reviews, and there's tools where you can moderate your reviews and respond to reviews through a central tool, like where you get a tool and you just go to that tool and it'll populate some of the review sites. And then I would also say, one other, again, if you have more money, I would say it's about integrated campaigns. So streaming TV is a great way, versus broadcast is a great way to target. And it's interactive in nature where you can use QR codes. We all watch streaming TV, right? So you see the QR codes that pop up, and sometimes you can even click on a button that will give you more product information as you're watching those. And the beauty of streaming for an advertiser, not for a consumer, is they can't fast forward through those, but they can a lot of times on the DVR through broadcast.
That's true.
And then if you want to humanize the brand, which I think is key, is really putting a face on the brand, because people want to work with people.
Yep.
I think events can play a really big role in your integrated marketing strategy. And in particular, if you're a local business, and maybe sponsorship, not just attending an event, but maybe sponsoring events, because as we said earlier, brand is about impressions, beliefs, and expectations, and those are driven by association with things. So product placement, probably can't afford to do product placement, but an example would be James Bond. BMW did product placement in the James Bond movies. Well, there's a certain association now that you're going to make with BMW because it's cool and it's contemporary and it's it's in a movie like James Bond, but you get the idea of an association. You have to be careful with brand safety to make sure you vet these sponsorships, that there's no negative connotations.
Sure.
And then again, it does align with your vision and your mission. And then I guess the last thing I will say is, even though you're a marketing team of one, what you're doing affects the entire organization. So you have a very critical role. You're not in a silo. You are developing a brand promise that needs to be delivered. Brand promise is making a guarantee that you're going to deliver something.
Yeah.
And when you do your advertising, you're making a promise and a claim, hopefully with some proof points. If you don't deliver, then the consumer is going to be confused and lack trust, and you're not going to convert.
Back to the trust issue again. I think that those are really valid points. Wow, that's quite a guidebook right there. Let's just wrap all that up and make some sort of a book maybe together. Okay. Let's do a marketing team of one handbook. How's that sound?
I'm down.
Yeah, I think
I have that journalism background.
Perfect. We'll talk after this episode recording. Yeah. Doug, this has been awesome. I mean, my brain is just on fire thinking of 25 more questions, but we only have a few hours to talk. So, I mean, it's,
well, maybe I can come back.
It's limiting. Yeah. I think it'd be great when you, I have the energy to come back again. It'd be really wonderful to kind of talk more, because there's just so much deep dive information. Again, speaking to the scale of some of the things you've been working on, the budgets, tens of millions of dollars of marketing and advertising spend were under your purview. I think that, there's a whole science to that too, but I think what you've done is you've really brought it down, and I really appreciate how you've taken those gigantic kind of pie in the sky, from my perspective, budgets and perspectives, and really brought it down to that single point of marketing that exists in a lot of small organizations. So thanks again. Appreciate it. Did you want to give out some of your socials, or how do we get in touch with you, Doug? I mean,
well, I just want to also thank you for inviting me, and it's been a pleasure to meet you. and check out your page design organization and some of your podcasts. And hopefully we'll start a friendship, which would be nice. And as for me, I am dipping my toe a little bit into the consulting business. I'm enjoying it so far. Good. So I have a company called Utopia. I have not launched a website yet, but you're the first time I've ever said it. It's called Utopia Marketing Consultancy, and I'm looking to go in that direction. I'm big on LinkedIn, so please connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you have any further questions, I'm happy to answer questions and maybe grab coffee or something.
That sounds great. Yeah, we'll put all that information in the show notes for sure so that people can get in touch with you and tap your gigantic brain for all of those insightful little bits of knowledge there. So thank you so much, Doug. We appreciate it.
Sounds great. I appreciate it too.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. For more information and other episodes, subscribe to the Marketing Team of One podcast on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify podcast networks. You can also chat with us on the r/Marketing Team of One subreddit or visit marketingteamofone.com to learn more.